When I left Christianity and fundamentalism, I noticed how the ideology creates an environment that any deviation from toxic, outdated, and behavior expected that isn't biologically supported by evidence is deemed deviant or wrong. How do these ideologies and doctrines of Christianity and world religion affect how people react when they see things they don't understand, fear, or can't handle? Violence, running away, intolerance, bigotry, fear are a few ways that usually men respond when it comes to things they don't understand. Last time we talked about racial and disability hate crimes. I want to talk about one of the oldest. Personally, I think it predates racial and disability hate crimes. A hate crime so egregious that I don't think there's been a society that hasn't had these hate crimes. We're going to talk about sexual orientation, sexuality, and identity hate crimes. Now, how are these different from racial hate crimes? Well, racial hate crimes are words, behavior, violence, whether temporary or long-term fatalities, that have to do with seeing people as inferior, different, dumb, or deformed. What's curious is that something I've recently learned is that somebody can be in multiple hate crime statistics. I read somewhere that people think being gay is a white person's problem, which is so factually incorrect. It's like calling AIDS the gay disease. Just because the majority of people who come out of the closet and announce who they are is white on television doesn't mean that white people are the only group of people that struggle with orientation. I've met many people in therapy and in real life that were African American, trans, and gay. Imagine being part of all three of those groups that hate groups focus on. People who are not white, who fall into groups that are targeted by conservative political groups, can feel more prejudice than a simple white gay person. So just because somebody's gay doesn't mean they don't fall under other hate crime groups. You can be African American, Asian, Jewish. You can also be gay, and you can have a disability all at the same time. And all those groups are stigmatized, taboo, and targeted, and dehumanized. People can be a part of many groups, or no groups. In my opinion, the longest, most egregious discrimination belongs to people who don't identify as cis and heterosexual, or just don't want labels put on them. People who may be heterosexual but refuse to be a stereotype. Women who are cis, heterosexual, but don't want to have a relationship or kids. They experience hate from people. Maybe not as serious or damaging as people who are killed, but all discrimination is important. And we're going to talk about some slurs. We all know about the N word, something that's becoming much more used under Donald Trump. That's not really a surprise at all. When you elect a racist, racism becomes more open. It's just the way life is. And we've all heard of the F word associated with people who identify or act a little bit more feminine. I mean, there are many F words, F slurs for people who just aren't alpha males. There are slurs for women who reject the patriarchal heterosexual traditional relationship. I mean, people in polyamorous relationships are called slurs. I mean, people call me the unhappy, mean, lonely cat woman. I've never owned a cat in my life. I'm not a pet person. When people call me slurs, I just say, I don't want a man in my life. And when they call me slurs and say you're going to be lonely and unhappy, I say don't threaten me with a good time. Everybody who does not conform to the conformity of heteronormative cis patriarchy is victimized, dehumanized, erased, targeted, and killed. Sometimes all those things at the same time. And I grew up in Christianity. They completely erased everything that doesn't resemble the nuclear Norman Rockwell painting family. I never knew about asexual, aromantic people. I was almost 18 before I learned that people are attracted to the same gender. I was so sexually repressed, I'm not even sure if I'm straight. Because if you don't know anything else exists, you're homeschooled in Alaska, you have no access to the internet, radio, or television ever in your entire childhood. I've never read books that had gay characters. The most out there I've ever read as a child was when a woman was a witch. Found out that's a slur for women who did not conform to being a wife and a mother back in the day. It never seems to go away. Anyone who doesn't conform to their heterosexual, boring, narrow-viewed expectation in society is villainized, killed, or eradicated as a threat. And as long as Christianity and fundamentalism rejects different kinds of families, different kinds of consensual, loving relationships, and views these consensual, loving relationships as perversion, predation, and gross behavior, it's not going to help with the consent problem, the loving relationships, whether platonic, familial, or romantic. When you see loving, consensual, legal relationships as wicked and beyond contemptuous, you're not going to be open to having consensual, untraditional discussions about sex, consent, and female sexuality. It just won't happen. And if by some miracle it does, it's not probably going to be medically and scientifically accurate. Anyone who supports the straight agenda, and by straight agenda, I mean the machine that views anything that isn't sterile, white, conformative, nuclear family as right, is a threat. That's the straight agenda. It's funny how shows that show just a twinge of gayness or trans is viewed as predatory. When we are force-fed 24/7, even in our dreams, the straight agenda, with or without our consent. If you can't enjoy gay-themed shows the same way you enjoy straight shows, I'm very sure there's some bigotry and ignorance there. You don't have to completely understand it. You don't even have to have it as your favorite genre. But if you make a big deal that 1 out of 7 cast members plays a gay character, well, my response is, I have a problem with there being 6 straight people. But I don't see anybody making a big deal about their agenda that they force fed us since we were in the cradle. The straight agenda has been pressuring people for gender reveals, baby blanket colors, what toys kids play with. Straight people, they sexualize kids in the cradle. If 2 toddlers, a male and a female, and I'm talking about based on cisness in a straight culture, if they see a boy and a girl playing together, they call it cute, and that somebody is a boyfriend and girlfriend at 2 years of age. That's sexualizing minors. And yet, if a gay person says the exact same thing, they call them a predator. The biggest agenda is the straight agenda. It is as predatory as possible. I'm not saying that every time straight people are portrayed, it's propaganda. I'm saying every time a straight person is shown, it is upholding a system of oppression. If you don't see the consistent non-heterosexual characters getting as many happy endings, good resolutions, positive, healthy relationships as straight people, that is discrimination. I recently watched Stranger Things. 2 straight couples got in-game priority. And the 2 gay couples, we don't know. That's bigotry. We don't know whether one of the female lesbian relationship broke up and is ambiguous, and the other one was never resolved. The care that was given to the cis heterosexual relationships was never given the same treatment to the gay and lesbian relationships. That's bigotry. I want to talk about the most insidious form of the straight agenda. If men who are comfortable in their skin and the gender they are comfortable with and identify as, if you can't handle seeing a different type of guy who may be more feminine, more emotional, wearing different clothing or different makeup, you need some education. If you yell slurs at people based on how they identify, who they're with, that's bigotry. Anyone who touches and bullies somebody who is not heterosexual, who isn't white, you are a bigot. Christianity creates bigots. Not all the time, obviously. But the idea of cis heterosexual marriage as the only legitimate way to live and have a family is bigotry. It's hateful. Be straight, be what you want to be. As long as you do not see your relationship and sexuality as the only valid, natural, and worthy of celebration, acknowledgement, respect, and protection. If you cross that line as I'm the best and anything else is a threat, that's bigotry. All orientations and sexualities and lifestyles that are consensual and legal should be able to exist together and be in unity. If you can't, you have a problem. If people have to leave town and move somewhere else because they are afraid, that area has bigotry problems. America was founded on racism, homophobia, sexism, colonialism, and genocide. How people act under Donald Trump right now is how they've always acted. They're just a little bit more gutsy about it now. Over 2,000 people a year lose their lives because of bigoted, right-wing, or conservative Christian ideology. You're not a good person because you're a married heterosexual man. You're not good because of who you are. It's what you do, what you bring to the table, and how you make the world a better place. I don't care what you are. If you think you're better because you have a penis or you have white skin, you're a bigot. If you're a woman, if you see black people, Asians, or any ethnicity beneath you, you're a bigot. If you vote for men or women that uphold the straight agenda, bigotry, sexual misconduct, being a felon, creating and sponsoring terrorism, you are a bigot. I don't care if you voted for Donald Trump because he could resolve the economy. You knew he was a bigot. If you supported and voted for a bigot, you're a bigot. You can be a remorseful bigot. You can become educated and flee the bigoted environment. Then you won't be called a bigot. Anyone who thinks, says, or acts in a way that treats gay people, trans people, and asexual or child-free, man-free women as inferior and unnatural are bigots. And the biggest bigots I have ever met are people in monotheistic, patriarchal, man-made, masculine deity religions. There's a reason why the most sexual misconduct happens in conservative homes, conservative churches, and conservative schools. So, for those who celebrate Juneteenth, good for you. I didn't even know what Juneteenth was until last June. That's how bigoted my home environment was. I had no clue what Juneteenth was. 2 years ago, I kind of got the hint that it had something to do with minorities because I lived in Florida. And if you don't live in a major city, you're going to be living in places that really, they're more likely to celebrate the day MLK got shot than Juneteenth. Florida is one of the most dangerous, bigoted places for trans and non-heterosexual people to live. Utterly dangerous. I Googled last June during the first Pride Month I've ever celebrated as a straight identifying person and learned that Juneteenth is a celebration of African American liberation and background, history, and culture. It's as important as Mardi Gras and Hanukkah. They're celebrations of religions and nationalities. Funny fact, Florida doesn't celebrate Juneteenth. They have a different holiday. But if they could, they would repeal any holiday that isn't centered around white people. Because the people they elect down there are bigots. Looking at you, Mr. DeSantis. I left Florida to get away from the grossness of this kind of behavior. And if you've never heard of Pride Month, I hadn't, believe it or not, because I grew up in one of the most homophobic, bigoted denominations of Christianity, Calvinism and Baptist Church. It's based on Stonewall, 1969, where people in the gay community in San Francisco and in, well, New York kind of started first, and then San Francisco kind of started later. Basically, it was decades of police brutality and harassment in places where queer and non-gendered people could find peace and tranquility, and the police would come in and raid things illegally. So they started rioting, and through the decades were able to gain solidarity, start foundations, gain more rights, ability to be more safe, especially in California. And honestly, I believe that a lot of these riots were due to all the states repealing anti-sodomy laws, which was a wonderful part of the later part of the 20th century. And we celebrate Pride every June to honor the history of the protests of Stonewall and just the history from the beginning of time up until last year. It's a wonderful time. And even it's for people who aren't even in the community. If you're an ally or somebody that just wants to support and help marginalized people, I don't just celebrate it in June. I celebrate it every month. Because, people don't just die and just get discriminated against in June. So, if you want to learn more about things that led up to Stonewall, like the Harvey Milk assassination, it's January. So, fill your time with education. I want to talk about Matthew Shepard. Now, don't get me wrong. Over 2,000 people die every year. And every one of these tragedies, these people that had amazing lives and were interesting people whose future was stolen from them, they're all equally important. And maybe when I'm done with the 1,200 Reasons series, maybe I'll do a video and list the most important ones in the last 50 years. But right now, I want to talk about probably the most famous poster child for discrimination and bigotry against gay people. Now, there's some controversy on how accurate the Matthew Shepard story is. We could debate all day the reasons for the murder. There may have been many reasons for the murder. But we cannot deny that the murder was perpetrated with homophobic hatred. It could have been a robbery. It could have been fooling around, a hazing. But homophobic bigotry was one of the biggest driving forces in the murder. There may have been multiple motives, but the homophobic motivations of the killers was very prevalent, especially in the police interrogations. So for those who grew up and never heard of Matthew Shepard or don't know very much about him, he was born in 1976 and perished on October 12th, 1998. He was an American student at the University of Wyoming who was beaten, tortured, and left to die near Laramie, Wyoming. He was transported to a hospital in Colorado. He died 6 years later from severe head injuries sustained during an attack due to a pistol whipping.